purpose of the showcase events are to reflect the very lively periodical publication culture that exists in Ireland now. I remember early 90s noticing that there was like no periodical in the country south of the line stretching from Galway to Dublin, and there were maybe like four or five active publications at the time, and some of them had very precarious existences. So far, the festival last year we featured Southward Ciphers, which describes the daddy of all the poetry journals in Ireland. It's the one that's been longest in existence. Poetry Bus, Penny Dreadful, and we're doing Poetry Ireland, which can be described as the poetry publication record in Ireland. It's the publication of the National Poetry Organisation, and it always has distinguished editors, which it rotates from time to time. Current poetry editor is the distinguished bard Vona Groarke, and Vona is just going to give a short talk about her editorial experience, what her plans might be or might not be, and then we're going to have a reading, one poem each from 7 poets who've been in an issue that Vona has edited. So would you please welcome Vona Groarke?
Thanks, Pat. I am the editor of Poetry Ireland Review. I came in early summer of 2013. No, I didn't. 2014. And I'm doing 8 issues altogether, so I have 5 done and I have 3 more to do. And when Maureen Connolly asked me to do it, I was very happy to say yes, because as Patrick has just said, it is a publication of record, of note, and I value it hugely for many reasons, but I'll give you just a few of them. One of them is that it's a print journal in a world in which print journals are something of an I don't want to say dying breed, because it's by no means a dying breed, but maybe a threatened breed. It's a print journal. We really only do the print part of it. There is a kind of an online presence as well, but it is by and large a print journal that is something that we pay great attention to, the look of the thing, the feel of the thing. We think of it as an object, and it has very high production values, which are nothing to do with me, but are a lot to do with, specifically with Paul Lenihan, who has been the kind of constant presence throughout the various rotating editors. I think of it as a friendly but discerning space. I think of it as a room where poems can talk to each other. Not poets, really, because there's plenty of places where poets can talk to each other. There might even be too many places where poets can talk to each other, but maybe there's not quite so many places where poems can talk to each other. So I think of it as a room. And then when Pat asked me to talk today for just a short amount of time, I began to think, well, what kind of a room is it? If it is a room, what would its characteristics be? What would it look like? How would you get there? And so on. And I thought, well, in some ways it might be a confessional, it might be a kitchen, it might be a cinema, it could be an antechamber, it could be a bedroom, it could be I don't know, it could be any sort of it could be a club. No, actually that's the one thing it's not, is a club, because entry to this room is open to anybody who has a good poem. But even saying that, a good poem, really it's a poem that I think is good because I'm the editor, and that's all I can bring to the table really is my taste. When Pat said, talk about your editorial policy, if you have one, I thought, well, I really only have one editorial policy, and it is to apply my taste in the most generous and fair way that I can. And I think that's an editor's job, really. I don't have policies as such, that's it, to apply my taste in as generous and fair a manner as I can. So the poems can get admission, based on, I suppose, my judgment of them and my thinking, this is a great poem. And I only publish poems that I think are really good poems, because I think that's my responsibility. It's a curious kind of a room where plainness and self-consciousness are attributes or opportunities rather than liabilities, but I think it is that kind of a room. It's not a place that you have to dress up for, it's not a place that you need a makeover for, it is a place that you have to be, that the poem, I think, will need to be maybe careful and deliberate and maybe playful as well, well made, with a very strong and secure sense of itself. Something to say, but also very committed to its way of saying it. So that's really what I'm looking for. It's a lot of work, it's a huge amount of work actually, because we're in the happy situation of attracting a huge amount of submissions in hard copy. We're probably one of the few remaining magazines that still invites submission by hard copy. And I think that may seem a little old-fashioned, but there's a kind of a seriousness about printing out, putting in an envelope, putting a stamp on it, sending it off, that I think signals good things about a poet's intention. And just general, earnestness about the project and about the magazine. It's not something that you can do in a hurry, it's not something that you can do flippantly, really. So we still do it that way, and we get, as I say, a huge number of submissions, which is a very good thing. Sometimes when you see the huge envelope coming in once a month, it's not an envelope, it's a package, and sometimes you think, oh, that's me taken care of for the next while, but of course it is a very good thing that we are in that situation. Of the 8 issues that I am doing as editor, 3 of them are special editions, 2 of them have already been and gone. The very first one I did was a Seamus Heaney special issue where I invited 50 younger poets to write a short essay about a poem. I always want to put the focus on the poem, on the poetry where possible. We did a Yeats special issue last year to commemorate the 150th anniversary of his birth, and the next issue, which is coming in April, is called The Rising Generation, and it features 35 not necessarily younger poets, but poets who have had a first collection or pamphlet published in the last 5 years. So it's a kind of a way of taking the temperature, if you like, of what's up and coming, or the potential of contemporary Irish poetry. And then after that there will be 2 of the regular issues, where we will introduce new work, sometimes by new people, international, Irish, whatever. We will do reviews. It's one of the things I was very keen to do when I came in, was to try and do more reviewing, get more reviewing done, because I think it's terribly dispiriting to publish a collection of poetry and for it not to get acknowledged or not to get treated seriously. And so that's something that if you've been in the habit of taking subscriptions to Poetry Ireland Review, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, there's a lot of reviews in this, but I think it's important to do it. And we also have a number of features and so on. So it's teeming with material, I think. It's always a great pleasure for me to receive the hard copy of the new edition. I think the readers, well, I was going to say they're happy. The people who've been accepted are very happy, and the people who've been rejected tend not to be. But I think the readers, the people with annual subscriptions, the reaction is positive, and that's, I mean, all I do is I facilitate. You know, I'm there at the door of the room, if you like, saying, please come in. Or in some instances, unfortunately, saying not this time, but maybe come again next Friday night. So that's what's involved in the thing, really. It's been a great pleasure for me. I know I'm not finished yet, but almost finished this, but I'm not finished the editing. But it has been a lot of fun. It has been very exciting, actually, to receive new work. It's been a great pleasure to get a sense of what is happening out there and the kind of vibrancy of contemporary Irish poetry, but also a sense of the respect with which the journal is held in an international way, because we do get subscriptions from everywhere in the world, which is great. So it's a pleasure, it's a delight, and I think the readers that we're going to have now read a poem each will give you a sense of why it is such a pleasure for me to be involved in the journal. So let me just hand over to Pat. How do you want to do this?
Yeah, well,
introduce them?
Yeah.
No, very good. So thank you very much.
A very brief introduction speech. The list of readers is put together by serendipity. Readers, poets who are at the festival for one reason or another that I've noticed have appeared in the last 3 normal issues of that Vona has edited. So first I'd like to introduce Doireann Ní Ghríofa, who is a featured poet in the festival this year. She's published books in Irish and in English.
Hi everyone. I'm very grateful to Vona because she was the first person who took a poem of mine in Poetry Ireland review, and I think for anyone who begins writing poetry, it's such a huge deal. When I got that acceptance, I was absolutely overjoyed, and actually I still get really excited thinking about it. And I'm delighted that I have a poem forthcoming in the new issue of it, and I'm going to read, well I have 2, but I'm going to read one now, and it's As Gaeilge. I'm going to read the translation as well in English. Drana. Chuoine me sínta siar the lab ospedéil. Nuair a chonaic mé strán siar san uirí sin cool in a chuisige, srínta shrang láthair. Nuair a chuala sé curries na neantóga, scaoil sé dá íl frab a wadrar chlé, imethe de róid tríd an chuil. Híl mé go rá sé stray, go dtí go bhaca me agus ina bhéil, cuileánín sioní, scréice a chuointe, ciúnathe, ag drama an madra, fuam a bhatáin ó sracha, a chnáb a bug a briste ó cipíní scrista, agus pos an ghair, fleocht dearg. Ranna mé an bharing an istó. Níor ág an strís a bhéil, is ag fécint an más bel rive. Lig sé fad glucha a bhadra, gur il sé le na hála. Cum a múnta, sivílta a rísear. Chuoine mé ngálar a réib do chorp. Grain na fiúcala a get ort. Agus mise I mo hí taobhleat san ospedéil, ag brathnú an ár a imríoch ort. De chorp crappa faoin na úlach. Stáin mé ní ort I do réanacht ach glúiseacht an galir. An bhréigean a tharraing grúig ó do cheann, agus cuacht ó do bhatáin, agus mise an cláire a chiann gan teacht I gabhart. Mise a bhreithnig ar do bhás I mo chost. Snarl. You came back to me again, still stretched in your hospital bed, when I saw a stranger in the forest yesterday, a dog by his heel on a tight leather leash. He heard a stirring from the nettles and freed the dog. I watched it bound to the left, rushing wildly through the woods. I thought it lost until I saw it return with a fox cub in its jaws. Its feeble mewling silenced by snarl, and then the sound of muscles tearing, small bones snapped, and the dog's snout wet red. From behind the tree I watched that man, and the grin that never left his face as he watched that small death. He whistled the dog to his heel, where it was a polite pet once again. I thought then of the disease that attacked your body, its fang grasp, and I sitting by your side in the hospital, watching the ruin inflicted on you, your limbs crumpling under its heft. And I stared not at you in your humanity, but at the speed of the disease, the violence that ripped hair from your head and withered your muscle, and I, a coward, I just sat there without coming to your aid. I watched your death in silence.
Liam Ryan is a poet who has just been published on the New Liberties Press poetry list. It's the Liberties Press doing beautiful books. They're classically designed and very beautifully typeset that remind me of Dolman editions. Liam is at the festival as a punter and as an attendee of the Doireann Rhys Jones masterclass. Please welcome Liam.
Hi everybody, even though I can't see anybody from here. It was a great pleasure when I was invited into that space that is Poetry Ireland. At the time I was assembling the collection, and for me and for the publisher to get the thumbs up from someone like Vona was very important. This poem was based the whole thing of thinking about home, or where is home, and reading the poetry of Miłosz, that Lithuanian, Polish. Every time I can never figure which is which, and different biographies of different locations, who was forced from home and always wanted to go back. And there's a couple of poems kind of merged that I'm influenced by. It is simply called The Meadow. It's more than enough now, after more than 40 years, to chance on the smell of hay, for the statues of memory to burst, and feel again the fork in my hands, the welts across my palms, see the swarts bristling, dust dancing in the sunlight, hear the guttural accents arguing about hurling matches, hear father tracing and teasing, smell the whiff of gold flakes, the yellow box in the stubble. But there is no going back. That field is poached and pockmarked, the hedges and ditches overgrown, the trees cut for firewood, the matches fought and forgotten, all of the men dead and buried, lost to us forever. This life is not some trial run, regardless of our misunderstandings. Can I instead find the courage to follow the rhythm of my breath? Can I turn within? Can I trust? Can I reap the harvest of this meadow?
Gerard Smyth is again another featured festival poet this year. He's one of 3 Daedalus poets who are contributing to this event. He's an editor of Poetry in the Irish Times, published over 8 collections. Please welcome Gerard.
This poem is an elegy for my first teacher in poetry, really, Michael Smith, who founded New Writers Press when I was still a kid, really. He opened his door, his heart, and gave me access to his bookshelves. And one is very lucky to encounter someone like that at a young age. Michael died about 15 months ago. And in response to his memory, Michael was very proud of his Dublin working class roots, but was also a brilliant translator of Spanish poetry and won several awards in the Spanish government for his work. And the poet that he introduced me to, and I'm always grateful for that introduction, is Antonio Machado. His poem is called Thanksgiving, in memory of Michael Smith. About his life, the facts are in order, but the poet is missing and an elegy is called for, or at least a thanksgiving for his book of dedications. His days when he listened to a schoolroom clock that seemed slower than time, slower than the narrative of Caesar's wars, a journey to the village of stone and dust where they still had Good Friday crucifixions and the hired musicians played all night the flamenco songs of Andalusia. The poet is missing. Has he gone to Machado's garden or Mangan's doss house, perhaps to blend with the colours of the Alhambra, seek again the after-rain stillness of the air out west in Connemara? No, he has gone the hidden ways, close to the river mouth, where his song began in the clamour of the bird market, whistle of the North Wall dredgerman. Thank you.
Noonan is a Daedalus poet, a lecturer in French at Cork University Cork University and an essential constituent of the poetry community in Cork, and we're proud to say an informal graduate of the Munster Research Centre's peer review workshop. Please welcome Mary Noonan.
Thanks very much, Pat, and thank you very much to Vona Groarke and to Poetry Ireland for publishing me. It was a great thrill to find my work within the covers of Poetry Ireland Review. The moths. The artist is sitting perfectly still by his mulberry tree, watching it. He has been in that pose all day. The white moths have flown through my open window, drawn by the light of a bedside lamp. They are everywhere, cloaking the walls, sleeping in the folds of sheets, crawling over the shoes on the floor. I try to flatten some with newspaper, but they are too many, and I lie down among them. Soon they cover me, their anemic wings lining the creases of my eyelids, lashes thrumming to the sound of 1,000 tiny wings flicking. In the bed, I rustle. Moths are spinning from hairs, slinking over the skin of my scalp and pubis. I lie in a rictus. In the morning, I walk on a flittered bridal veil of wings, from bed to bathroom. I pass the artist. He is sitting by the fish tank, watching his black piranha slip through cool water behind glass. Has he been there all night? Thank you.
Matthew Sweeney is another featured poet at this year's festival. He's the current editor of Southward. He'll be putting together his final issue soon. He's arguably one of Ireland's most translated poets. He has selections of his work published and translated into several languages throughout Europe. Would you please welcome Matthew Sweeney?
It's always really good to get into Poetry Ireland, and it's really sad that Southwark doesn't get anything like the number of submissions that Poetry Ireland gets. The Dream House. The dream house was yellow and had no chimneys. Its one window was round, a porthole so big a child could stand in it. The door was smaller and red, with a golden chain and padlock. Around the house was a Zen garden of sand raked in circles, with occasional bonsai palm trees, each with its own yellow spider swaying on its gossamer web. Behind the house was a long, flat mountain that sloped left. White goats could be seen on it, and a few climbers or walkers, the gradient being so gentle. Inside the house was a circular staircase with yellow mosaics leading to the inner upper haven. There was no furniture downstairs. There was no one living there.
Thank you.
Hugh O'Donnell is a poet. He's published several collections. He's a consistent friend and patron of the Cork International Poetry Festival. He's here again this year to attend Doireann Rhys Jones's masterclass workshop. Would you please welcome Hugh O'Donnell?
Thanks to Pat and to Jennifer and to the generous impulse down here in Cork which makes this festival happen. At the turn of the new century, I needed a little bit of a kick out of my lethargy, and I attended a workshop in the Dublin Writers' Centre. It was given by Vona, and I learned so much from that, and I just want to acknowledge her also, apart from being a gifted poet, as being also an excellent teacher. Thank you. Faversham is in Kent, by the way. To my sister in Faversham. How are they now, I want to ask? The limes at the foot of the hill, all arthritic knees and elbows, 10 or 12 of them in the dip by the red brick asylum for the aged, whose families have reduced them to a handbag clutched on a lap, a postcard from some sunny part. There must have been a wall, some estate posing for attention behind these remnant sentinels, gone careless now. As you stride past early mornings, bramble straining ahead for the wood that no longer exists, rousing the ghost of a scent he might chase.
We have one final reader to go. Before I introduce him, I just want to point out how one of the reasons why print poetry journals are endangered is because bookshops, for one reason or other, have become reluctant to stock them. And it's now, I mean, it was so easy in the 90s and 80s to go into your local bookshop and pick up the current issue of Poetry Ireland. It's not so easy now. And believe me, having engaged with the book-selling industry from both the perspective of the bookseller and the publisher, ensuring that Poetry Ireland's availability in bookshops around the country is not Poetry Ireland's fault. So what I want to do is encourage as many as possible to subscribe to Poetry Ireland, and if you haven't subscribed yet, to let you know that we've got copies of the latest issue for sale outside. You might sample it, especially if you're a poet and you aspire to be published in a good journal. The journal will cease to exist if we don't support it. We won't have any journals to be published in if we don't buy them and read them. So that should be well done. Our final reader, Stephen Connolly, he was one of our pre-booked poets last year. Evidently he enjoyed himself so much he couldn't resist coming back again this year. He's just finished editing a new Blackstaff anthology of younger Northern Ireland poets. He's associated with the community poets that exist around the Shanks Healy Centre. Would you please welcome Stephen Connolly?
Just to follow on from what Pat said there about bookshops, I work in the last independent bookshop in Belfast, and I can tell you that when we get copies of Poetry Ireland Review in that Vona has edited, they don't stick around for too long. Pat also said there that I was at the pre-booked readings last year, and it was a couple of days after this poem was accepted that I decided maybe I should give this a go and send some poems to Pat. As he said, I enjoyed myself so much that I convinced Stephen Sexton and Manuela Moser to send some poems. So if you enjoyed Stephen and Manuela's reading in the last session, in a roundabout way, you have Vona to thank for that. I heard of a trick that Philip Larkin had that supposedly to get the poems published that he really wanted to have published, he would stick in one that he thought was a dud at the end. This is the poem that I stuck in at the end that I thought was a dud. I've half come round to not thinking that. And that's, again, thanks to Vona. That's a confession. Vona talked of the journal being confessional sorts. That plays into this poem. Another exchange. The heavy door was open. I was a sinner, a simple country person, the least of all believers, but something of his boyish face was easing from the off. His boyish face that flickered in relief against the wall, his boyish hands sleek as polished glass. Music played allegro as the moon made its slow advance through the skylight across the floor where, as instructed, I placed a turnip at his feet, whereupon his sleek boyish hands and quick boyish tongue were moved to act, his voice becoming my voice, his hands becoming my hands. As he carved from the turnip my father the deacon's face. He told me what I had to hear, and I was quick to mention war, whereupon his boyish eyes receded far beyond the night. I was about 16 at the time.